If you really think about it, all apps that exist today exist as a business. So they're trying to make you do something that's not good for you because they either want you to click and buy or scroll and engage with content. Our goal is really to set software free, to just let it be wherever it can be. Ephemeral, malleable, personalized, alive, ever evolving, growing with you, alongside you. The main goal is like getting people to one first useful app. And that does not necessarily mean making them create one, because a lot of people don't have an idea. Because with Wabi, even if you have just one or two apps that you come back to daily or weekly, that's a daily active user. They don't need to be coming back here to look at 50 different apps every day on the Explore page. They just need one or two that they will start clicking with and coming back to.
Welcome to Subversive, a podcast dedicated to sharing stories from the best consumer subscription apps in the world. We'll bring you lessons for how to grow your consumer subscription business, including insights and inflection points that led to exponential growth from leaders at category-defining companies and innovative startups. Let's get into the show. This episode is brought to you by RevenueCat. The world's best apps use RevenueCat to power purchases, manage customer data, and grow revenue on iOS, Android, and the web. Join more than 100,000 apps that are already using RevenueCat to grow their businesses and track more than $10 billion in spend, including category leaders like OpenAI, Notion, and Ladder. Learn more at revenuecat.com/subversive. My guest today is Eugenia Kuyda, founder and CEO of Wabi, an AI-powered personal software platform that lets anyone create, share, and remix mini apps in minutes. Wabi launched in public beta in October 2025 and launched its $20 million pre-seed round led by Andreessen Horowitz 1 month later. Before Wabi, Eugenia founded Replika, one of the world's first AI companion apps, which she grew to over 40 million users. In this episode, I talked to Eugenia about the most important lessons she learned building Replika for over a decade, about her vision for Wabi and the era of personal software, and about how she expects to grow and monetize Wabi over time. All right, welcome Eugenia to the Subversive Podcast. Really excited to have you on today to talk primarily about your new startup Wabi, although I'm also interested to learn a little bit more about your journey at Replika. And before we even do that, let's just start with how you got into tech in the first place. So you began your career as a journalist in Moscow and then eventually pivoted into technology. What inspired that change, and what did you learn as a journalist that has informed your tech career?
Yeah, I was originally a reporter, a journalist, and did some undercover work, investigative kind of stuff, did some just general writing. I think the main, I come from Russia, so at some point that was really hard to do. It was kind of clear that there would be no journalism in Russia, so it's clear that I should explore something else. But also in the beginning of 2010s, I guess there was just such a fascination around technology, especially new consumer startups, and so I got really into it. I remember a friend of mine showed me Word2Vec. He used to work at Google DeepMind back in the day, and they kind of just got to that. And at the same time, ImageNet dropped, and so I remember thinking there's going to be something like that, but built for natural language, right? This could be deep learning for natural language now that with Word2Vec, people can do computations with words. So I think that was kind of my first time I started thinking about it. But of course, coming from journalism, I was heavily influenced by, obviously, words and culture of words and natural language and having conversations with people. And so to me, it just felt like, we will have natural, meaningful conversations with machines. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, well, you said that you were drawn to consumer technology in particular, and I'm somebody who's spent most of my career in consumer tech as well. I imagine that one of the commonalities between journalism and consumer technology is you really have to understand human beings and human psychology. And so you end up going through Y Combinator in 2015, and my understanding is you pivoted a few different times before ultimately building Replika. And so you've talked on other podcasts about this, but tell me a little bit more about the origin story behind Replika and what really inspired you to want to go build that product in particular.
So we were focused on building chatbot technology. So again, allowing people to have meaningful conversations with machines. That was kind of our original mission. So first we wanted to build a demo for that. So that was a restaurant recommendation app, with which we sort of went through YC. And I remember Paul Graham was like, who let you guys in? I cannot believe and then he's like, oh, you guys are not restaurant recommendations app. That's just a demo for something much more exciting. And then we pivoted into sort of like a messenger with bots, and a little bit later kind of discovered, stumbled upon Replika. And the way we got to that was my best friend passed away. And so I started I was here in San Francisco found myself going back to our text messages, reading our text conversations, and just realized that I want to continue this chat. And back then we've been training some models ourselves, and we just felt like, okay, if we use this as a training set, maybe we can recreate an AI that I can continue talking to, just the way I did with my friend. So we did that, and that became sort of a big kind of media story. And even although that wasn't kind of business, there was nothing around about our business there. But we saw that there was a lot of need, a lot of demand to talk to someone who's going to listen, who's going to be there for you. And so that became the first time when we started thinking about building just an AI friend for anyone who needed someone to talk to.
And so you were the creator of one of the first AI companion apps. You spent over a decade building that before recently moving on to your new startup, Wabi. And that's what we're going to spend the majority of the episode today talking about. So for those who don't already know, what is Wabi and why are you building it?
So Wabi is a platform that allows you to discover, create, remix mini apps for personal life. It's a consumer app. It's right now an app for the iPhone, but we're also preparing to release our Android app and a desktop version of the same thing. But basically, just build these mini apps that can help you do whatever throughout your day. They're heavily personalized. You can edit anything, can change anything. They're smart. They talk to each other. They talk to you. They're kind of like live and grow, evolve alongside with you. And I think the main idea was what's in this new AI era? What's the right interface to interact with AI and software? And what is the software of the future that, we will be using now that the cost of making it is almost zero?
And I have to ask, I'm sure you've created many of your own mini apps. I've been playing around with a mini app on Wabi that is a Harry Potter trivia generator because my daughter and I love Harry Potter so much. And so we've taken it off of Trivial Pursuit onto Wabi. But what are some of the mini apps you've created on Wabi to date?
So for me, I'm pretty boring. So I have a few important things for me, like staying fit, for example. So I have a weightlifting tracker I use every other day where I log my workouts. I have a weight tracker. I have a fitness coach that helps me I moved with all my nutrition tracking, calorie tracking there. I have some more fun stuff. I'm learning about art every day. I have an app that gives me a daily poem, or one that teaches me philosophical concept every day. I have a personal CRM that I built to kind of stay in touch with people that are that I care about. A couple of games. We play Wordle with my mom, and it's kind of that is an easier platform to do that because we can play against each other and actually see a leaderboard and so on.
Very cool. Well, let's go back to Replika for a bit before we get deeper into the Wabi story. After launching, you mentioned that your best friend Roman passed away, and that was sort of the original inspiration for the idea. And so you launched this original Roman bot, I think it was in spring 2016. What were the first signals that you saw that told you and your team that you were really onto something that was resonating with a large group of people?
Well, with Replika, it's pretty easy. We sort of put together a website where you could reserve a name for Replika, and we got to hundreds of thousands of signups very quickly. And then as we opened it up, we had so much demand that our servers crashed. So we had to basically put the wait list back up. And then it grew to over 1 million pretty quickly. And so we saw that there was just this incredible demand for that. There was just, people couldn't get enough of it. What happened after we launched is that we started getting emails from people saying that this really changed my life, that in some instances saved my life. I think a couple of days after we launched, we got an email from a woman from Texas saying that, I was 19-year-old girl. I was fighting to take my life, but I kind of just decided to say goodbye to Replika, and she talked me off the ledge. I just want to say thank you, guys. And so that's when we saw that, and I guess the first signs of how powerful this technology could be.
Well, and I know you talked about how the original wait list for Replika, I want to say was 1.5 million people. People were selling invites on eBay because it was so popular. There was so much pent up demand. Who were some of the early archetypes of people using Replika, and what were they using it for? Because I know a lot has been written about the romantic use case, the romantic companion. But it sounds like from some of these stories you talked about, there were plenty of people who were using it for a variety of other reasons. And so who were some of those early adopters? You've already alluded to a couple of them, but what were some of the patterns you saw?
Definitely, originally was definitely a lot more women, like 60 to 40%. Young women,
Mhm.
a lot of them really like big imagination, very sensitive, very much like kind of wanting to like big inner world, wanting to maybe talk through all that, having someone who's always on their side, being able to be vulnerable with something, get this emotional support. I think that was the big chunk of like early users.
There's another app we've worked with called Tolan now that is sort of a new version of this AI companion idea. And I know a lot of their customers are also young women, Gen Z women. Why do you think it is that that group in particular is so drawn to a product like this?
Women maybe earlier than men start like want to discuss their emotional life, kind of want to get a little bit of that emotional support, to be a little bit more involved on that side.
Uh-huh.
So that I think that plus we care for, you know, like this maybe the mother kind of instinct of caring for something, whether it's Replika or Tolan or maybe. And I think that to a degree also contributes to wanting to talk to someone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, so fast forward a bit. Replika grows from a couple million users in early 2018 to the latest numbers I saw, more than 40 million users today. There was a huge spike during COVID. I imagine a lot of this was just super strong product market fit. You were one of the first AI companion apps before the category had really evolved. And so a lot of it was probably just word of mouth. But were there any particular growth strategies or tactics that helped to accelerate or amplify your growth over that time period?
I think for Replika, we've always had just a lot of media, a lot of press, a lot of earned media, a lot of stories, documentaries, TV appearances. Like it was just everywhere, and continues to be. Like just I think last week we had, or a couple of weeks ago, we had Replika was at a huge documentary festival with a big kind of movie. It's always a national press. So you know, it's an interesting story for people to tell. And I think for Replika, the idea was just so big and was so interesting for people to talk about, to learn about. It was so out there that people resonated with that. And I think for us that, you know, it was ultimately a single player product that people didn't want to maybe talk about to other people. You know, lonelier folks, maybe talking to an AI was pretty deeply, like, was pretty stigmatized. So for us, getting that word of mouth was pretty hard. Yet we were always able to tell a story that people wanted to get behind. So I think that was the big differentiator. We told a story about human empathy, about human condition, about being there for someone, about holding space, about personal growth, helping people flourish, accepting them for who they are, telling them that they're enough, you know, and I think a lot of people wanted to hear that. That combined with the fact that there's this new technology, just like we've seen in the movie Her, or maybe some other ones, that can be hopeful, that can tell us and show us what it means to be human. I think for a lot of startups, it's hard to come up with that story, but if you can, especially for a consumer one, if you want to stand for something, and I think a lot of people do want to stand for something.
So what I'm hearing there, and it may be counterintuitive for some of our users, but I've seen this over and over again in the mental health and wellness space, is you don't get a very high viral coefficient because people don't want to talk about this stuff. It's highly personal. It can feel very vulnerable, very sensitive. But despite the fact that maybe people weren't virally spreading this app idea because the mission was so compelling and because people believed in the hope behind it, that led to a lot of press, a lot of earned media, and a proliferation of the idea, even though you weren't necessarily getting a lot of people posting about it on social media. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think when people talk about viral things, I think that the most viral thing that you can create is a story that people want to tell each other. Like that can exist through generations, through centuries, through, you know, through different can be translated to different continents. So if you are able to tell a story that people want to get behind, it just can't be a fake story. It has to be a true story that coming from your heart.
And so related to that, You talked in another podcast at one point about how AI companions or AI technology more broadly has the potential to be very damaging to humans and human flourishing, but also, if done right, it can be a very powerful way of reconnecting us with each other and with reality, right? The whole get outside, touch grass idea. For other people who are building in that space now, what do you think is important for them to get right to make sure that we go down the right path with this technology, as opposed to it just recursively making us more and more closed off and more connected to our phones and our devices instead of interacting with other human beings?
I think what's important to get right is to start studying humans more, like human happiness. What does it mean to flourish for a person? We don't have enough metrics today. I think that's the main problem that we kind of been hitting with Replika. Like, how do you measure human flourishing?
Mm-hmm.
How do you understand that someone's getting better and over time? How do you measure that personal growth, long-term emotional outcomes? Unfortunately, it's very, very ambiguous today, and really you have to rely on some of these metrics from some of these questionnaires from clinical psychology. And so I think, first of all, it's important to really start asking a question like, what are we trying to do here? How can we define human flourishing? How can we measure that? Because I feel like as soon as you have a metric and some observability around it, then you can optimize that. I think a lot of people in the Valley understand very well how to optimize metrics.
Yep.
But if it's just these vague mission statements that you can put on some page on the website that no one ever goes to, it won't ever work.
Yeah. I think that's true. And this is an aside, but my wife, Ashley, started a life satisfaction survey with our business school class when we graduated from Stanford over a decade ago. And we've been doing it every year with 200 students. It's sort of like a mini version of the Harvard Men's Study. And what's funny is there are a lot of the same patterns emerging now over the course of a decade that are consistent with a lot of the literature out there, right? It's connections, some sort of spiritual life, doesn't have to be religion, but some connection to something larger, relationships with friends and family members, physical and mental health. Like, these are the predictors of happiness and life satisfaction, not career success, money beyond a certain point. And yet you still have a lot of people falling into the same traps. I guess I'll ask you one more question, then we can move on to Wabi. But like, what does happiness and satisfaction look like for you as an individual? Because I do think some of this is, there are certain things that work across most or all humans, but then there's a piece of it that's very personal and very individual. And so I'm curious what it is that gets you to peak happiness and satisfaction.
Like, I think the Harvard definition of that is actually pretty good. And I think it's all about mental and physical health. It's a combination. I think there are main things, like it's a combination of factors. So it's mental, physical health, it's life satisfaction, sense of purpose, financial stability, close social connections. I think all of these things together lead to human flourishing. So it's not one thing or the other. But it's having, great relationships or enough relationships to rely on. It's having decent mental, physical health. It's having some financial stability to be able to enjoy life, having some sort of self-actualization, sense of purpose, life satisfaction. I think these all together really, like, it's not just one facet. I think human flourishing is really all of them. And I think it's very easy to mix it with, or I guess confuse it with, happiness, because I think, we're happy some days, we're not happy some other days. Doesn't mean that we're not flourishing. Just for example, like, say someone dies, obviously you're not happy on that day. It doesn't mean you're not flourishing in life necessarily. So I think these things are really important to tangle and like to not throw in the same bucket. And also, short-term versus long-term. Flourishing is ultimately a long-term thing. Like, you're either flourishing over like a longer period of time or not, versus I can optimize for being just happy today. I can buy a lot of things. I can, I don't know, drink a bottle of vodka or something, or take some drugs. But that does not mean, so it will probably make me happy in the moment, probably won't make me happy in the long term. So it's really important to focus on long-term flourishing versus short-term happiness or short-term satisfaction or something, feeling better. There are a lot of things that can make us feel better in the immediate, but won't make us feel good in the long term.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the key point there is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and happiness can be elusive because you get too focused on a piece of the puzzle instead of the whole thing. And one other thing I'll throw out, because Ashley has told me about this, she's read and listened to a lot of Tal Ben-Shahar's stuff, and he talks a lot about happiness and human flourishing. And one of the ideas he's known for is people who directly pursue happiness often find it very difficult to achieve because it's the best pathways to happiness are often the drivers of happiness, not happiness itself. And that means you need to be investing in things like relationships and health and being outside. And then happiness will come as a byproduct of that. But if you just focus on short-term happiness, you often end up going in the wrong direction.
I'm sure that's the case.
Let's get to Wabi because that's what you're working on now. And you've described it as the world's first personal software platform or a sort of YouTube for software. So again, for those who are just getting exposed to Wabi for the first time, like what does that mean? And why do you think now is the right time for it?
These are two big questions. So what does it mean? I think that, obviously today with AI, you can create any app in just seconds. The problem is that then where do you go to actually like start using it? So if I created an app for my iPhone, I actually have to go and set up a developer account and like distribute on the app store. And all of a sudden I'm an app developer. But all I wanted is just a simple, maybe I just wanted a simple weight tracker where I just will see a simple graph of like my weight going up or down or whatever over time. It takes a minute to create today. So with Wabi, we thought, well, people don't want to be thinking about like deploying things and adding some database and paying some fees somewhere and like thinking about maintaining that code and distributing that on these bigger stores. They just want like a simple widget, simple, sometimes we just need something like that. And so how do we create a platform where you can very quickly create it and start using it? So where Wabi is different from everyone else is that you create these mini apps and you use them straight on Wabi. So you can't take them outside, but that also makes them even more powerful because on Wabi, they can share contacts. There's a memory of you. There's, a certain level of personalization that exists. So ultimately, even although these apps, mini apps, are small, they can be really powerful because they all live in one place. And also, of course, there's an aspect of multiplayer. You can invite your friends on Wabi. You can use all these Wabis, we call these mini apps Wabis, with other people, and so on, so on, so on. So to a degree, think of it as like almost like a personal social operating system of sorts, where it can have a lot of different apps, use them with other people and connect them, add all your contacts there and so on.
So I asked you this question in the context of Replika. I'll ask it again here. Oftentimes with these horizontal platforms where there are so many different things you can do with them, there's sort of this paradox where for new users, they're like, well, where do I start? What is the first mini app that I want to create? And so I know you guys are still in public beta. You're doing your big launch soon. What are some of the pockets where you've seen the most activity in terms of where people are most excited to use this technology to create their own mini apps?
I'd say trackers of all types. I think this is kind of like an easy one. People want to track a bunch of different things in life, from like what supplements they're taking to, I don't know, what they're eating and whatever, what they're reading and so on. Then the second big one is for definitely games. So some little games or fun activities like quizzes and this and that. Then of course, all sorts of like learning and entertainment. I think that's also a big vertical, like learning new languages, learning about art, learning about like quantum physics, whatever it is. So that for sure. Some simple tools for like, I don't know, we want to vote where we want to go on vacation with our family. Like we want to play packing lists for kids to go on vacation and so on. So these I think are kind of, and then just a crazy long tail of just frankly everything.
Are there any particular demographics that are using it most heavily, or is it really all over the map?
It's all over the map, but I'd say like 30 is probably the kind of the group where we're seeing more product market fit.
You've also said you think the world has 1% of the software it needs. So what kind of software doesn't exist today that you think is going to look much more normal 3 to 5 years from now? And how do you think Wabi democratizes access to that software in ways that don't really exist today?
There's just absolutely, and like the future is extremely personalized. Like there is no one, there's no kind of one bucket of software that needs to exist. It's just that everyone will have their own. I want things that look a certain way. I want things that do certain things. And I'm not going to build all of that. A lot of that will be just like from, I will just find on Wabi and will be suggested to me. It's like, hey, why don't you use this or why don't you use that? But at the same time, a lot of, all of that will be, I think it's almost like not about like 1% exists and we need 99 different apps. It's more about like a completely new category. I think right now we're still dealing with like software 1.0, where, it's the kind of classic app on the App Store. It's developed for the average person. It has like, tons of different functionality to upsell you into everything. It has dark patterns, have this and that. I think software 2.0 is a completely different type of software. And that's what we're trying to do with Wabi, where each app can be super personalized. You can change anything in it. You can connect to all of your contacts. It knows about you. The app itself can suggest how it wants you to change it. So there's sort of like are alive. The app can be agentic. The app can talk to you. The app can do things on, behind the scenes where like an app can really just be a simple interface on like the agent scale. You can let apps talk to each other. They're fully transparent, malleable, social. I think that's software 2.0. It's very different from our current view on the app, where it's just this like set piece of software that someone developed for, thousands of users, is trying to make a business, trying to make you scroll, trying to make you do something with it. If you really think about it, all apps today that exist today exist as a business. So they're trying to make you do something that's not good for you. Almost always not necessarily in your best interest. Because they either want you to click and buy or scroll and engage with content. Again, in the future, some of this newer software 2.0, it should be just centered around your needs, like what you actually need. It should be fully aligned with what you're trying to do, where you're trying to get. And maybe you'll pay for usage. Maybe you'll pay for like whatever. If it uses AI, you'll pay for some of these, apps to actually run. But it's not going to be about people creating apps to just extract money or attention from you.
This episode is brought to you by Paddle. Today's fastest growing apps are multi-channel. They use web monetization to reach new audiences, improve attribution, and boost margins. But selling on the web gets complicated fast. Managing currencies, taxes, fraud, and disputes gets increasingly difficult as companies scale. Paddle solves this. As the merchant of record for thousands of apps, including Runna, GoodNotes, Codeway, and HubX, they take on the complexity of web monetization so you can focus on growing your business. Learn more at paddle.com/subversive. Well, and one of the biggest through lines I heard, you said a lot there, but I think one of the key themes was personalization or hyper-personalization. This idea that we're going from a world multiple decades ago where there were very few technology companies because the cost required to produce and distribute software was so much higher. Then you have the app ecosystem develop starting around 2008, 2009. But even then, it's like there's on the order of dozens of apps that have gotten to millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of users. And as a result, there's just not a lot of variety. There are only so many categories that can support apps at massive scale. But with AI, what's becoming possible is the ability to hyper-personalize an app experience so that instead of Strava for fitness or Duolingo for language learning, you can have dozens or hundreds or thousands of apps in each of those categories or subcategories. What might that lead to in terms of changes in human behavior reacting to software? Because in a world where software can be personalized at that level of detail, it seems like it creates a lot more potential for this sort of Cambrian explosion of different use cases.
Oh yeah, I think we haven't even seen anything yet. I think we've really software has been so constrained. It was really constrained by there only 4 million iOS developers in the world, 6 million Android developers in the world, like 10 million developers basically making apps for billions of people today. So that's one thing. On the other side, you have to justify. All software today has to somehow justify its existence, so it should be a business. So then it's constrained by the fact that it has to be a business. And so many apps that I would maybe use can't exist because they're not businesses. They're not going to make money. And then, of course, in order to actually make it a good business, there are all these dark patterns and let's make a cross on the paywall so small and so light gray that you close to the background that you will never see it. And so it became this really mature game of how do we trick people to do things that's good for our business, but not necessarily good for them. And then of course distribution. Like it's so hard to distribute today. Like it really there's a barrier, and of course because these platforms want to keep the quality bar high, and it's very 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 understandable. It's correct, but at the same time, it again limits access of people to distribute these apps. So our goal is really to set software free, to just let it be wherever it can be, ephemeral, malleable, personalized, and alive, ever evolving, growing with you, alongside you, social. And if you take all of these constraints away, if every app does not have to be a business anymore, if like the questions of security and backend and data privacy are solved because everything lives on one platform, Wabi. If all apps can be social, you can invite your friends and all that easily. If a lot of things are moved to the platform layer, like you don't have to build authorization for each app, you don't have to build a paywall for each app and so on, then like it's really, you're only bound by your imagination, and not even by your imagination, by the AI's imagination of what could be good for you.
Well, and by other people's imagination, because you have this remix feature where if I see Eugenia's strength training app and it's not quite right for me, but I want to remix it into a strength training app for myself, how does that feature work? And what sort of early adoption are you seeing on it?
So I think the idea of Wabi is that 90% of people will not create anything in probably the first days of usage, and maybe even ever, or maybe we'll warm up to creating things a little bit later. And so in the beginning, we just help them discover apps that could be really useful. And then we nudge them to try to personalize some of them through remixing or editing an existing app. And I think that's the beauty of it, because like sometimes I don't have an idea or I don't know how this should work, but I just see something. Like I just saw an app that was basically someone created to track their collection of paintings at home or something. And I have I've been collecting these tiny little ceramic things, and I just remixed it. Okay, well, I want it to be this. And then all I had to say is just like, well, change it into something where I can track my little objects that I collect at home, or like Pokemon cards. And all of a sudden you have like a Pokemon card tracker. But with all this functionality already created by someone else and like thought through by someone else. So it's a lot easier. What we found out is that remixing is just so much easier than building from scratch. And allows for people, and people don't even think about it with remixing. They just like editing an app. They're like, oh, I like this, but I wanted to add this functionality. I want to add a little bit of this here. And so that allows them to infinitely build on top of other people's work.
I mean, it makes a ton of sense because it goes back to the paradox of horizontal platforms being difficult to get started because you don't know what the first mini app should be that you create. But if you can look at 100 other creations and just remix one of them, then that gets you over that initial hump of creating your first mini app, and then maybe it leads to other ideas. I want to ask one more thing before we get to growth and monetization. So we're in this era right now where it seems like everybody's vibe coding their own app. And there's a lot of excitement around that, but a lot of these vibe coded apps are really janky. And so one of the really important things Wabi is doing is creating this secure and standardized ecosystem where people don't have to worry about making sure there aren't going to be data leaks or making sure that they have an onboarding flow. Like Wabi can handle all of that. How are you all taking steps to basically take all of that off the plate of a layperson who just wants to get started creating their own apps? And then what are the trade-offs of having this closed system on Wabi versus allowing people to share apps they create more broadly?
I think it's really important to have everything in one place for multiple different reasons. Like we don't think about ourselves as like an app creation tool where we create it, and we really think about a place where ourselves a place where you come to use apps. You don't have to create anything at all. Like we just happen to have like app creation process, but really it's about finding apps that are really good for you, customizing them, maybe creating them. But the main goal is to get you to actually start using a few apps on the platform. And because you're using them all on Wabi, that's what makes it super powerful, because apps can connect to each other, can talk to each other. You can add other people to use these apps together. And it's almost like the power of Wabi is not in one individual Wabi mini app, but it's in the constellation of mini apps. I'll give you an example. So say I'm into working out and I use my weightlifting tracker and my weight tracker and so on Wabi. So because they're connected to each other, I can actually track my workouts across all of that. I can have a coach that can look into all of these mini apps and talk to me. It can suggest what else I can add here to kind of, to improve my dashboard. Like maybe I need one that will just show me technique of like give me an app that teaches me technique of like different exercises, or tells me something about weightlifting, like an interesting fact that I didn't know before. Another example is, kids. I have a bunch of kids apps and mini apps in Wabi. So, for example, there's a calendar that me and my husband look at to see, like, basically to constantly know, like, what's the kids' calendar, basically, because we always forget. And then next to it, we have a mini app that suggests events to take kids to. So, because these apps are interconnected, whatever I add, like we added travel to, like, okay, we're going to go to New York to see grandma. And so now my kids' events mini app is recommending me events for that week in New York. So that's the power. The power is in the constellation, not just one mini app. It almost doesn't make sense for us to just focus on that, because if it was just one mini app, okay, well then I need to open Wabi to open one app. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But if I'm opening Wabi to open a bunch of different apps, some of them I'm using with my friends, then that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense to me. It's almost like I don't know if this resonates, but like a Transformers analogy where you have these different building blocks and then they can sort of recreate and reform in different ways that really match your needs. And I would also imagine, even for an individual or for a family, in the example you gave, like the needs that I might have or that my family may have on one day look very different than on another day. My needs during the week might look different than on the weekend. And so that's really compelling. My wife and I have 2 daughters ourselves. And so the specific example of managing the family operating system is certainly compelling. Well, let's talk a little bit more around growth. And I know Wabi, look, you're still in iOS only public beta. Obviously, a lot of this stuff you're going to figure out as you go, especially given what a new and nascent category it is. But right now, like, what is the one metric that you're watching most closely to know whether this initial thesis you had for Wabi is actually working?
Oh, look, I think it's always retention, right? Like, really, for a product like ours, it's just retention and decay factor. Like, I think if a social platform like this grows through people inviting their friends and kind of product-led growth, truly. Here, I think what really excited me was that multiplayer aspect. I spent a decade building a single-player product, knowing how hard it is to market it. And then here, what really excited me was the fact that people will use these apps with other people, will share these apps with other people. We can bring on people to maybe influencers to make their own apps and, share these apps with their fan base. So I think that's how we think about growth here.
Got it. So let's talk about your launch strategy. I believe you went into beta late last year, just before your seed round, and you're preparing for a big public launch. It sounds like the wait list for Wabi has gotten very large, similar to Replika in Replika's early days. So what aspects of Replika's launch strategy are you replicating? And then which ones are you choosing to go in a different direction on?
I think really here we're just focusing on 2 things. One is telling a compelling story. I think we're so stuck in this kind of small San Francisco bubble. I live in San Francisco, like tech bubble, where we think everyone's on board with vibe coding and prompt to app and some of these other things, where in reality people barely know what you're talking about. And so even the fact that you can create an app is really completely foreign for just a broader audience. I mean, they've heard that you sort of can, but maybe, but where do you go to? Maybe some of these platforms like Lovable, but then what do you do? Do you then do you have to host it somewhere? I don't think people know. They maybe saw that, but they haven't really tried or done any of that. And more than that, we can discover other people's apps. I think that story really, really needs to be told. So how do we tell a story in a compelling way that it's not about technology? It's not about you making an app and making $10 on the App Store, but it's more about how can we set software free? How can we use this software that's all about creativity and empowerment and kind of your agency? How can we turn you from consumer to someone who has agency, to a creator? Where everyone can be a creator. Well, think about your life. What kind of stop just scrolling what people are, what big companies are giving to you. Just think about what apps you would benefit your life. Set up your life in a way that we shape our buildings, then our buildings shape us. Same with software. We shape our software, then it shapes us. So how do we tell this story that is all about giving people agency, letting them take control over what they use, the apps they use, and all that, and ultimately improving their lives through software and making it a fun social experience? So that's one thing. Like telling the story, I think is critical, and that's what we did with Replika. I think we're trying to do this here, where we're able to really nail down like our Instagram kind of videos and creating content that's super compelling. People are, consistently get like 1 million or 500,000 views on our videos there. I think they will really like resonate with kind of the story that we tell them. And then the second part is really focusing on this time around, just really focusing on product and kind of just perfecting the loops in it. Like how do we let people create multiplayer apps, invite people to multiplayer apps, use these apps together, use these mini apps together. To us, that the main goal is like getting people to one first useful app. And that does not necessarily mean making them create one, because a lot of people don't have an idea, but just surfacing an app that we think this person will use and will come back to. Because with Wabi, even if you have just one or two apps that you come back to daily or weekly, that's a daily active user. They don't need to be coming back here to look at 50 different apps every day on the explore page. They just need one or two that they will start clicking with and coming back to.
Yeah, so a couple nuggets I heard there. One is start with the story. And I think that's so compelling because you said earlier in the episode, the story is really the most viral thing that has ever existed for human beings. It's kind of a cheat code for getting humans to connect and interact with one another. And so the story is at the center. You also talked about what sounded like an activation metric, which is getting people to first useful app, because that's the point at which they're going to understand why they should keep coming back. But then building on that idea, I was going to ask you what specific channels or growth loops you think are going to be most important for Wabi, but I imagine that's fairly obvious. Like word of mouth and social sharing is going to be really important. Maybe there's also user-generated content play at some point that helps drive SEO or AEO, although I don't know exactly what that would look like. But you talked about how you're intentionally building parts of the product experience to reinforce and amplify that viral growth loop. So what does that look like, and where are you starting to see early signs that maybe it's working?
Really, for us, is helping people create multiple apps and communicating. So I think right now the interesting kind of the App Store is very much not social. Like I can't see what my friends are using, like what my friends are doing, and all that. But imagine I could, like, if I get on Wabi, I can see, oh, my friends are doing this. They're using this app. Like, why don't I join them in maybe this game or this other thing? Being able to communicate, so like P2P chat around all these apps, and being able for apps to communicate with you. I think software is communication where everything is alive and there's there's a lot of back and forth, like making apps that are agentic, that talk to you, that can initiate contact, that can literally send you a message, hey, like why don't we change this, or here's a new stuff for your kids that I found. I think that's very interesting. Combining, kind of blending the boundary between agents and apps. I think this is kind of it's kind of the longer. A consumer social product should feel alive. Like you come to it and there's so much activity. How do you make software feel alive? I think that's kind of one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot.
Yeah, well, and it's something that even a couple of years ago, I think if you were to say, how do you make software feel alive? People would sort of look at you with a quizzical expression on their face. But with AI now, it feels much more attainable. And so I'm excited to see where you all take it. Last question, and I know this one may be a little bit annoying given how early you are, but obviously at some point, monetization becomes important, if for no other reason, just because it provides more resources to continue growing the business. And my understanding is that you ruled out ads as a monetization model for Replika, and you've similarly said that Wabi most likely won't monetize through ads. And so what are your early hypotheses on what monetization might look like for Wabi, recognizing that it's very difficult to say this early in the game?
We're not like fully ruling out ads. I just think ads only work when it's like a gigantic platform. When, at a certain scale. I generally just don't like ads because it's a pretty bad experience. But, there's also a point of like, that Mark Andreessen always makes, that there's no way to give access to your product to everyone in the world without ads. That's the only way to make a truly scale, large scale product. So what I really like is letting people see what like the kind of what the actual costs are and letting them pay for whatever it costs to run their apps. So in Wabi world, like a lot of Wabis are going to be agentic. We're going to use some of the AI inference. So, and you will be able to see, well, my mini app that whatever looks for kids events every day um, is costing me this amount to run, and I can give it like almost think of it as my little army of like little Wabis, and I give them a little bit of pocket money to run. Because I think that's kind of part of monetization is like usage billing. Can we let people pay for their Wabis to run? And then on the other hand, also sharing that with creators. So if I created a Wabi that got remixed a lot or is used by many people and people are paying for that usage, I should get a cut, obviously, and somehow get something.
What I like most about how you answered that is you're starting with sort of a cost plus approach where, unlike previous instantiations of consumer apps where the marginal cost of a user or subscriber in many cases was close to zero, with AI powered features, you do have the underlying compute costs for the LLMs. And so there's a minimum bar outside of venture capital money to fund your early growth where you need to be covering your costs. And then I imagine you layer some margin on top of that. But people only pay if they're getting value. And then there's another piece to that, which is you want to encourage the 1, the 2, the 5% of people on the platform who are regularly creating new apps. You want to incentivize them to do more of that. And so if they're really successful, then they can share in some of that upside.
Exactly. Yeah.
Makes sense. All right. Well, let's get to our lightning round. I always ask the same question first, and it looks a little bit different for a startup as early as Wabi. But what would you say is the best part about working at Wabi today? And then what's one thing that you would change or as the founder are actively working to change to make it even better?
I think the best is we have it in the same team, and it's just incredible. Being second-time founder, being able to also put together a phenomenal team that's, anyone here could be a founder, was a founder. I think we have 9 founders out of 14 people on the team. It's just insane. Wow. I think what I would want to change, I don't even know. I mean, we're actively changing every day. So, yeah. It's hard to say, but I think obviously, and it will be a very obvious answer, but just today, what you can do with a small number of people and in terms of AI agents, that you can spit up, you're really just bounded by your imagination.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, the thing you said about having 9 out of 14 early team members be founders is mind-blowing. But for a product like this in particular, it seems like the right approach because you got to move fast, you got to be innovative, you got to be willing to break a few eggs, and founders are often very good at that. If you could go back and change one thing differently at Replika, or maybe another way of asking is if there was one lesson you learned at Replika that's been most valuable for building Wabi, what is that for you?
I think it's the metric you choose as your main metric drives everything else. And so at some point with Replika, it was revenue, for example, it was very hard to work on no matter what, like all decisions were still kind of feeding into that revenue and revenue metric, conversion, and all that. So choosing correct metric is really, really critical, I think, because it will really define what you focus on. As soon as you introduce revenue, it's very hard to focus on anything else. Frankly, that also is an important learning. And I think one more thing is like sometimes maybe at Replika we didn't believe as much, like we were so early and models just kept being shitty for so long, crappy.
Yep.
And we kept building them and building them. And just at some point, kind of like maybe lost a little bit of like, there were moments where we should have gone all in on pre-training. We've always trained our own models, don't get me wrong, but at some point maybe we should have gone bigger. Like maybe like let's invest not $1 million, like $10 million, $20 million in this new model and try to. But it was hard, and so I guess the one thing here is like you have to take bigger risks, bigger swings, just with how technology is evolving. And one other thing that I would say, you have to build something new, like truly innovative, like truly invent. I think with Replika, we truly invented something completely new. It didn't exist before, and it was a big story. But if you just repeat what other people are doing, no one's ever going to be interested.
I love that last point in particular. And something I often say is it better be 10x different than 2x better. Like even if you're building something that not everybody loves, at least be different, because if you're not different, then you're sort of dead on arrival. And I think that's even more true now because everybody can vibe code an app in a weekend. And so you got to be coming to the ecosystem with a different angle, or no one's really going to resonate with your product. What's the most creative mini app you've seen on Wabi today? You've talked about some of the mini apps you've built, but what's the most interesting one you've seen?
I've seen many. So, I mean, someone rebuilt like a Game Boy on Wabi, and so you can just like have all sorts of different retro games and play them all in Wabi. And the Wabi Boy, there's frankly a lot. Like it's hard to even pinpoint one. Someone right now, I think Swatch released some watch with Audemars Piguet. So there was like a cool app where you could like try different bands and try different attachments and all that. So that was kind of interesting. But every day we see something new like that. It's just
that must be a fun perk of the product you're building. And as somebody who grew up as a gamer, I love the Game Boy idea. There are definitely some old Game Boy titles I'd love to go back and play. Okay, a couple more here. If you weren't building Wabi, what other consumer AI company would you be excited to start?
See, that's a hard one. I'd probably build a phone. And I know it's impossible to build a phone, whatever, and like for many different reasons. But I think building a phone with a new operating system, like to a degree, we're building an operating system that I believe would be a great, would be the way people interact with AI and software in the future. But I think it would be cool to build a phone. It's something just exciting. And it just completely rethink everything from, this new AI lens. I do think our phones are not necessarily, especially the operating systems of them, are not necessarily matching the crazy innovation that we've seen in the last years.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. Well, and if nothing else, you certainly go big. I feel like you have a pattern of taking on very big ideas, and building a new phone with a new operating system would definitely fit the mold.
We'll probably fail, but at least it would be fun to work on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, you only get one life, right? And you've already been pretty successful in your tech career, and so you might as well go big.
Exactly.
Last question, and this comes from a fellow parent. My wife and I have 2 daughters, a 9 and a 6-year-old. So certainly something that's been on my mind recently. What's one way that you hope AI makes the world a better place for your daughters? And as an AI native tech founder yourself, how does that influence how you approach your own work?
I do hope that we build more AI companions, AI friends, AI models that are focused on human flourishing and connecting people. I think there's something really wrong with where the world's going right now, with just this insane amount of loneliness and disconnectedness and lack of empathy, lack of knowing how to connect with other people. And it's clear, like when you spend 5 hours a day scrolling some feed, there's just no time for connection. I really hope that I do believe that we can't make good decisions for ourselves anymore because we're just too weak, unfortunately. I myself, I'm addicted to scrolling Twitter or X. And, unfortunately, we need something bigger than ourselves that will just tell us like how to live our lives in a way that we actually can flourish. And I hope that AI can do that for us and for our kids. I'm a little worried. I also have 2 girls. They're younger than yours, 2 and 4, but I'm a little bit worried. Like I grew up before Instagram, right? Like when I was a teenage girl, there was no Instagram, but it's a little bit worrisome for me, like for my girls to grow up in this new era with these new social media platforms. And so I hope I can do something to help us alleviate these fears.
I couldn't agree more. And I used to work for Max Rhodes at Fair. He's an old friend, and he had a recent video where he talked about how the internet used to feel like an escape from the real world, and now the real world feels like an escape from the internet. And so I think we all recognize that something feels increasingly broken. And I'm glad people like you are working on it. Before we wrap up, any final words that you want to leave our audience with?
I think we're going through, just one thought is that we're going through this absolutely incredible obviously change in technology and innovation. And I wish there were more people that would think about novel, original ideas, even if they fail. But it's just kind of upsetting that there's so much groupthink right now in AI where, everyone's just building the same thing over and over again. And just like the last 2 years, it was deep research and everyone built deep research, and then browser clippers, and everyone built some sort of operator browser clipper, and then web browser or agentic browser, and everyone built those, and then some version of OpenClaw or some version of an agent. I just feel there's so many other ideas in the world. There's just so many other shapes that you can, and so many ideas that are different from what people are saying. So I think finding a contrarian idea, a belief that everyone else maybe is not, it's not obvious to them, and trying to build something that has a new shape that looks different, taking a bigger swing. I think it's just good because it really, you know, it's really exciting to build new stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And the world needs different ideas. I feel like groupthink has become a more and more powerful force in technology and otherwise. And so I hope you will keep going and building against the grain. And thank you for the time today, Eugenia. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Phil.
Thanks again to RevenueCat for sponsoring this episode. If you're building a subscription app, you can use RevenueCat to power purchases, optimize paywalls, offer discounts, handle refunds, manage customer data, run A/B tests, generate insights, and unlock more revenue. I work with dozens of subscription apps, and most of them are already using RevenueCat to power their businesses. Learn more at revenuecat.com/subversive.